Welcome back, and thank you for tuning into Midnight Affairs Tales. We appreciate every single one of you. We'd love to know what part of the world you are watching from right now. Let us know in the comments. Now let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The blast was supposed to kill him. That's what they told his family, his friends, the world. The explosion had been massive, taking out the entire compound. No body, no remains, just rubble and ashes. Logan Creed, Navy SEAL, was dead, or so they thought. He was lying in the dirt now, a forgotten soldier in a foreign land. The blood on his face had dried, the dirt sticking to his skin like a second layer of armor. He wasn't supposed to be here. But Logan had never been one to follow orders in the traditional sense. When the world had thought he was gone, when his wife had cried in front of 1,000 cameras, he had been slowly crawling back from the edge of death, piece by piece. Every breath was agony, but it was also proof of life. He could feel the heat of the desert sun on his skin, the constant ache in his legs and chest, but none of that mattered. His mind raced with one thought: he wasn't done yet. He had unfinished business, something that needed to be settled. 2 years. 2 years of fighting, surviving, and waiting for a chance to escape. It had taken every ounce of his training to survive the hell he'd been through, but there was something else driving him now. It wasn't just the mission anymore. It wasn't just the SEAL training. It was the thought of coming home, of seeing the people who thought he was dead, and making them feel the pain he'd felt. He pushed himself up, his knees screaming in protest. The world was a blur around him, but he could make out the shapes of military personnel in the distance. He wasn't ready to go back yet, not yet. But he was close. Close enough to see the life he'd lost, and the revenge he was about to take. Harper. His mind flashed to her, to the woman he once called his wife. She had moved on, hadn't she? Gone to Travis, his best friend. The betrayal stung deeper than any bullet wound. Logan had always trusted him, thought of him as family. But now? Now it was about retribution. Nothing would be the same. The wind kicked up, scattering the sand across the desolate landscape. Logan took a deep breath, tasting the dust in the air, and with one final push, he was on his feet. It was time to return. Wait, I need to tell you something important. Have you ever realized that you keep watching my videos but haven't subscribed yet? This video has reached this point, which means you're enjoying it. So why not subscribe? I have a big goal, 5,000 subscribers, and you can help me reach it. Think about it. If you don't subscribe now, you might miss my next big video. This is the moment. Hit that subscribe button now. Do it now. And don't forget to hit the bell icon so you never miss out. I know you'll do it. And when we hit 5,000 subscribers, I have a special surprise for you. Now let's continue story. There was a different rhythm to being a Navy SEAL. It wasn't about fighting for glory. It wasn't about the medals or the recognition. It was about survival. It was about being the last one standing, no matter the cost. Logan had learned that lesson long ago, but the years of brutal training had made it more than just instinct. It was ingrained in him. He remembered the first time he'd gone through Hell Week, the worst week of training that could break a man. The physical toll was almost unbearable, the mental exhaustion pushing every part of his body to the brink. The instructors were brutal, relentless, testing not just their strength but their will to keep going. No matter how much they beat him down, no matter how cold the water or how long the days were, Logan never quit. But survival in the field was something else entirely. Logan had become a master of survival, his mind always a step ahead, always thinking of what to do next. Every movement, every breath had to count. He wasn't just a soldier, he was a weapon trained to kill, trained to survive. There was a calmness to his mind, a precision that came with the years of hardening his body and soul. In the months that followed the explosion, it was those skills that had kept him alive. Every day had been a test of willpower, a race against time and exhaustion. And it wasn't just his body he had to keep in check, it was his mind. If he'd let the rage and anger consume him, he wouldn't have survived. He had to be methodical, calm. Logan closed his eyes, his body swaying slightly as he steadied himself against the wall of a small, abandoned building. The pain was constant, but it wasn't as bad as the feeling of helplessness that had plagued him during his captivity. Now, he wasn't helpless. He was a man on a mission. But the mission wasn't the same as before. This wasn't just about serving his country anymore. This was about making them pay. Harper, Travis. They would pay for everything they'd done. The plane touched down on U.S. soil, the wheels grinding against the tarmac as Logan's chest tightened. For the first time in 2 years, he was home. The realization should have been sweet, but all he felt was anger. Anger at the lies. Anger at the people who thought he was dead. As he stepped off the plane, the cool air hit his skin, a welcome relief after the suffocating heat of the desert. The familiar sights of the city did nothing to calm him. This was supposed to be his home, the place he had fought to protect. But now it felt foreign. He didn't know how to feel. Was he supposed to feel joy? Relief? All Logan could think about was the betrayal that had waited for him. The betrayal of his wife, the woman who had promised to stand by him no matter what. The woman who, just months after his presumed death, had moved on to his best friend. As he made his way through the streets, the anger began to bubble up again. He could picture Harper and Travis now, laughing, living their life as if nothing had changed. But Logan wasn't dead, and that was the worst thing they could have ever done. They had thought they could replace him. They had thought they were free of the consequences. But Logan was back now, and they had no idea what was coming. He was no longer just a man. He was a force, a storm, ready to destroy everything in his path. He took a step forward, a smile creeping onto his lips. It was time to show them that Logan Creed wasn't someone they could forget. It was time to take back what was his. Logan stood in the parking lot, staring up at the courthouse. He knew the world had moved on, but he couldn't shake the sting of it, the finality of it all. His name had been read aloud at countless memorial services, his face plastered across flags and eulogies. It had taken only one blast to erase Logan Creed from existence, or so they thought. The explosion had made sure of that. No body, no remains, just a faint echo in the hearts of those who thought they knew him. But there had been no funeral for Logan Creed. Only a ghost. Dead was a word he hadn't quite come to terms with. It had been written across his life in permanent ink, a label he was forced to wear. Yet here he was, standing in the living nightmare of his own reality, where everything felt like a twisted echo of his past. His wife, Harper, her grief had been almost palpable when she'd spoken about his death. The world had cried for him, but he hadn't been dead. Not really. And now, after everything he'd been through, Logan felt more alive than ever. But that didn't make the sting any less. Harper had mourned him. Had she mourned for him, or for the version of him that had already died before the explosion? The lies stacked on top of each other like a mountain, and Logan had been left to pick through the wreckage. He walked toward the place he once called home. Each step he took felt heavy, burdened by the weight of everything that had been taken from him. The betrayal that lingered between him and the people he had once trusted, the love that now felt like a distant memory. They thought they were free of him. They thought they were rid of the man who'd made them feel safe. Logan clenched his fists as he approached the front door, the pain surging through him. His hand paused, hovering over the doorknob, and he took a deep breath. He wasn't the man who had once lived here. That version of him had died long ago. Now, he was the hunter. And there was only one thing left to do, make them feel the same pain he had. Logan sat in the darkened corner of a small cafe, hidden from the world, watching as the clock ticked slowly toward midnight. His fingers tapped against the cold surface of his coffee cup. The taste of bitter caffeine lingered in his mouth, but it was the plan brewing in his mind that occupied his thoughts. It was time. He'd spent the last few days watching Harper, watching Travis. They were easy to track now that they thought they were safe. They had become complacent, naive even. Logan knew the patterns. He knew when Harper would leave the house, when Travis would arrive. They had no idea what was coming. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about the truth. About uncovering what they had buried beneath the layers of lies. What had they done while Logan was gone? What secrets had they kept from him? Harper's alibi, her grief, it was all starting to crack. Logan's mind flashed back to the day the explosion had taken him out. The mission had been routine, until it wasn't. The memories were a blur, but there was one thing he was sure of. Someone had known. Someone had orchestrated it all. He had been left to die, abandoned in the name of convenience. and he was determined to find out who, even if it meant burning everything to the ground. The first person he needed to find was the one who had betrayed him the most, his wife, Harper, the woman he had trusted with everything, the woman who had once vowed to stand by him. She would answer for this. Logan stood up, pushing the chair back. The pieces were falling into place. There was no turning back now. He had to make his move. Harper stood at the window, gazing out at the street. It had been 2 years since she'd last seen him. 2 years since she'd buried Logan. At least, she thought she had. But the memories, those old, tender memories, still clung to her like a fog. She couldn't get rid of them, no matter how hard she tried. She'd never thought she would be able to move on. But here she was, living a life she hadn't planned on. Travis had been there for her, supporting her through the darkest times. He had stood by her, offered her comfort in the wake of Logan's death. She'd needed him, and somewhere along the way, she'd allowed herself to fall in love with him. But the guilt, it gnawed at her. It was always there. Every time she looked at Travis, it reminded her of the man she had once loved, the man she had lost. And now, with Logan's return imminent, everything felt wrong. How could she face him again? After everything? After what she had done? Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. Travis. Harper, we need to talk, he said, stepping inside. There was a strange look in his eyes, one she couldn't quite place. Something was off. I know, she whispered. I know we have to. But how do we even start? The door creaked open a little wider, revealing Travis' tense posture. We'll figure it out, he said softly. But we need to be ready for what's coming. Logan's not the man we knew. Harper closed her eyes. She couldn't ignore the fear now building up inside her. Logan's return meant the end of the life she tried to build. And that terrified her more than she could admit. Maybe it's time for the truth, she murmured, more to herself than to him. She turned away from the window, her mind racing. They hadn't prepared for this. No one had. But Logan was back, and nothing in her life would ever be the same again. The clock on the wall ticked with an eerie, methodical rhythm. Travis Knox stood near the bar, his back to the dim light filtering through the window. His hand was tied around the glass of whiskey he hadn't touched yet. The bitterness of the alcohol mirrored the bitterness in his chest, the feeling that never really went away, even though he convinced himself it would. Logan's name haunted him. It always had. But now, more than ever, the weight of his betrayal felt like a steel chain tightening around his neck. Every glance in Harper's direction, every shared silence between them, reminded him of the man he had once called brother. The man who had stood beside him in countless battles. The man whose trust he had broken without hesitation. Travis had always been loyal, or at least, that's what he thought. But loyalty had a price. And in the end, his loyalty to Harper had torn him in two. He had no idea how things had spiraled so quickly, how they had crossed the line from compassion to guilt and, ultimately, to a full-blown affair. He had told himself that it was okay, that he was helping her heal. But now, with Logan's return imminent, he couldn't help but wonder if he had truly done the right thing. There was a soft knock at the door. Travis didn't need to ask who it was. He could feel the tension in the air before Logan even entered. Logan's presence was like a storm building on the horizon, threatening to swallow everything in its path. When the door swung open, Logan stood there, framed in the doorway like a shadow, his eyes locked on Travis. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Logan's voice was cold, controlled, but beneath it was a storm of rage waiting to erupt. Travis didn't move. He stood there, feeling the weight of his own shame pressing down on him. I didn't think you were coming back. Logan stepped inside, the door clicking shut behind him. Well, here I am, he said, his voice low. And now we have a lot to talk about. Logan's words hung in the air, thick with tension. Every part of him screamed for retribution, for payback, for the satisfaction of seeing his enemies finally face the consequences of their actions. But as he stood there, staring at Travis, his once brother, something else gnawed at him. The anger was still there, raw and unrelenting, but beneath it, there was something darker. It wasn't just about punishing Travis for his betrayal. It was about making them feel it, the guilt, the regret, the agony of knowing that their lies had taken a man's life from him. And Logan wasn't just going to take it back. He was going to make them suffer for it. Why, Travis? Logan's voice broke through the silence, the question coming out like a bullet, sharp and unforgiving. How could you do this to me? I trusted you. Travis looked away, unable to meet Logan's gaze. The weight of the question was too much. The guilt clawed at him, tearing him apart. But there was nothing he could say. The truth was too raw, too unforgiving. I didn't want this to happen, Travis said, his voice barely a whisper. But I couldn't let her go through that alone. I didn't know how to help her, and then, you didn't know how to help her? Logan's laugh was bitter, dark. You didn't know how to help her, so you decided to be the one to replace me? Do you even hear yourself, Travis? Travis swallowed hard, the regret washing over him like a wave. He couldn't deny it. He had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. He had taken Logan's place in the worst possible way. Logan stepped closer, his anger barely contained. His fists clenched at his sides, and for a moment, it looked like he might strike. But instead, he leaned in, his voice low and dangerous. You're going to regret this, Travis. You and Harper both are going to regret ever thinking I was gone. Because I'm not. And I'm coming for you both. Logan's mind was a whirlwind of fury and strategy as he left Travis standing in the middle of the room, speechless and broken. The confrontation had been inevitable, but Logan hadn't expected the heavy weight of it to land so firmly on his chest. The rage still burned inside him, but it was no longer just about revenge. It was about reclaiming everything he had lost. The past 2 years had been filled with a slow, simmering anger, but now the fire was roaring. He wasn't going to let them walk away from this. He wasn't going to let them go on living as if nothing had happened. But Logan knew that revenge wasn't just about making them feel pain. It was about control. It was about turning the tables, making them feel helpless. Harper, Travis, both of them thought they had gotten away with it. They had thought that they could erase Logan from their lives as if he had never mattered. But Logan was back. And now, he was going to make them pay in ways they could never have imagined. He would do it slowly, methodically. He would make them feel the same fear and helplessness he had felt all those years in the dark. Logan's hands shook with the intensity of it, but he quickly steadied himself. He couldn't afford to lose focus now. He was close. So close. The first step in his plan was simple. Harper would be the key to this all. She needed to feel the weight of the betrayal. She needed to understand the pain she had caused him, and only then would she truly know the price of her actions. But Travis wasn't off the hook either. He would be dealt with, slowly, meticulously, just like Logan had learned to deal with enemies in the field. There would be no mercy. As Logan made his way toward Harper's house, a dark smile crept onto his lips. She thought she had it all figured out. She thought the life she had now was the one she wanted. But she hadn't reckoned with Logan Creed returning from the dead. And now, nothing would ever be the same. The night was thick with silence. Logan stood in the shadows, watching the house. It had been hours since he last saw Harper, and still, the weight of everything felt like a suffocating fog. The betrayal was no longer just a distant thought. It was here, real and undeniable. Every time he thought about them, something inside him twisted, a storm building inside. This was supposed to be his home, the place where he had built a life with Harper. But now it felt alien, like everything he had worked for was nothing more than a facade. The love they once shared, the promises, the dreams of a future together, all of it had been erased in an instant when they'd made the decision to move on. Logan's eyes narrowed as he looked at the windows, the faint lights still flickering inside. It was a calm night outside, but the chaos in his heart threatened to break free. He had been watching them both for days now. Harper, as she moved through her daily routine, and Travis, as he continued to live the life Logan had once been part of. The strange thing was, no matter how much time passed, Logan couldn't stop the feeling of betrayal, like a sickening poison in his gut. But there was something else there too. Something even darker. The more he thought about it, the more he realized there were secrets. Harper had kept things hidden, things that didn't make sense. Conversations, late-night calls, hidden looks exchanged between her and Travis. It all pointed to something deeper, something Logan hadn't known. But now he would find it out. Whatever it was. Whoever was involved. The layers of lies were thick, and Logan wasn't going to rest until he had peeled them all back. He turned and walked away from the house. Tomorrow, he would uncover the first part of the secret, and he wasn't going to like what he found. But no matter what it was, he was ready. And he was going to expose it. The truth was coming. Logan could feel it, just beneath the surface, ready to spill out. He had already uncovered small fragments of the lies, but the deeper he dug, the more it seemed like there was an endless supply of secrets buried beneath the facade. Every door he opened led to another question, and the more questions he had, the more desperate the need for answers became. He sat in the darkened room, the only light coming from his phone as he scrolled through the messages. One stood out, a text message from an unknown number, sent a week before his presumed death. The message wasn't just a random number, though. It was a name he had never heard of before. A name that now seemed to be connected to everything that had gone wrong. Logan leaned forward, his fingers trembling as he typed the name into his phone. The results were immediate, an underground network of individuals involved in illegal dealings. Connections to Harper and Travis. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. This was something much bigger. Something he hadn't expected. Why the hell didn't I see it? Logan muttered under his breath. The pieces were all there, but he'd been too blind with anger to put them together sooner. Harper and Travis hadn't just betrayed him. They were part of something much darker, something that had cost him his life. The phone buzzed in his hand. Another text. This time, it wasn't a name. It was an address. Logan stood up, his jaw tightening. This was it. The final piece of the puzzle. He was going to find out everything. He was going to finish what he had started, and once he did, nothing would ever be the same. Logan stood in front of the abandoned building, the address from the message leading him here. The air was thick with tension. Every nerve in his body was on edge as he approached the rusted metal doors. This wasn't just a simple operation anymore. This was the tipping point, the moment when everything that had been hidden came rushing to the surface. He pushed the door open, the creak of the hinges breaking the silence like a warning. His boots echoed on the concrete floor, every step getting him closer to the truth. The deeper he went, the more he felt the weight of everything pressing down on him. But then he heard it. A voice. Familiar. Harper's voice. His heart skipped a beat as he moved closer, his footsteps now slow and deliberate. He crouched behind a stack of crates, straining to listen. I never wanted this, Harper was saying. I didn't want to hurt him. But it was the only way. You understand that, don't you? We had no choice. Logan's breath hitched in his throat as he realized who she was talking to. Travis. We did what we had to do, Travis's voice answered. We couldn't let him come back. It would have ruined everything. We made sure he was gone. Logan's eyes widened. The betrayal, the lies, it was all laid bare now. Harper and Travis had been in on it together. They had planned it all. His death. His absence. They had made sure that he was erased from existence. But why? What was the true reason? What were they hiding? Logan's fists clenched as he stood there in the dark, the truth slamming into him like a freight train. His world had just been shattered, and there was no going back. The people he had loved, the ones he had trusted, they had betrayed him on a level that was unimaginable. His voice cut through the air like a blade, low and menacing. So you thought you could erase me? Harper and Travis froze. Logan stepped out from the shadows, his presence more terrifying than anything they had ever expected. They looked at him with a mix of fear and disbelief, knowing that the storm was about to break. As the tension in the chapter escalates, I want to ask you, the viewers, a question. Where are you watching this video from? I'm curious, because this story isn't just Logan's. It's something that could happen anywhere. Maybe you're in the heart of the city, maybe a quiet town, but the emotions are universal. Let me know where you're tuning in from, and let's see how this story unfolds in your world. Do you feel the same rage? The betrayal? Or is it just me? They stared at him like they'd seen a ghost. Maybe that's exactly what Logan was now, a ghost returned to haunt the living. Harper's hand covered her mouth, her eyes wide. Travis took a step forward, then stopped, like his legs refused to obey him. The silence in the room was unbearable, thick like wet cement. Logan didn't speak. He didn't need to. The look on his face said it all. "You're alive," Harper whispered. Logan tilted his head. "What gave it away?" Travis stepped in. "Logan, listen. We thought you were dead." "We didn't know. Cut the crap," Logan snapped. "I heard everything. You didn't warn me. You buried me. And then you moved right into my house, my bed, my life." His voice echoed through the space, and with every word, Harper seemed to shrink further into herself. "You think this ends with me just walking away?" Logan stepped closer. "You played God with my life. You decided I didn't matter. Now it's my turn to take control. Power. That's what he had now. Not the kind you earned with a badge or a title. The kind you earn when you've been through hell and come back with fire in your veins." Harper and Travis had taken everything from him, but Logan had something now they didn't. He wasn't afraid. Harper trembled, eyes full of something between fear and regret. Travis stood silent, jaw clenched, as Logan's words sank in. "You're not safe anymore," Logan said calmly. "And neither is the life you build on my bones." He turned and walked out, leaving them in a silence that screamed louder than any explosion. The storm had just begun, and Logan was the one holding the lightning. Logan didn't sleep. He couldn't. The rage had carved a place so deep in his chest that it beat louder than his heart. Every minute he'd spent trapped in that foreign prison, he had dreamed of home, of peace, of Harper. But those dreams were now dust. Now, there was only one thing left: justice. Not the kind served by courts or laws. The kind that made people feel what they made you feel. The kind that made your enemies beg for mercy long after you were gone. The next day, Logan didn't hide. He walked into the police station where Travis worked. No disguise. No caution. Eyes forward. Shoulders square. The room went quiet the moment he stepped inside. One of the junior officers dropped his coffee. "Is that?" Travis stepped out of his office like he'd seen the devil. "Creed," he said. Logan didn't blink. "That's still my name. You didn't earn the right to take it from me." "Logan, this isn't the place." "Wrong," Logan said. "This is exactly the place." He stepped up, toe-to-toe with Travis. "You think I'm going to just disappear again? You think I'm here for a dramatic speech and a quick exit? No. I'm here to let you know your time's up." Officers started moving toward them, but Logan raised a hand. "Don't bother. I'm not here to cause a scene." Yet, Travis didn't say a word. He just stared. Maybe he was hoping it was all a nightmare. But Logan had done his time in nightmares. He was wide awake now. "I'm not the one hiding," Logan said, his voice low. "That's your game, and I'm going to beat you at it." Then he walked out, calm, composed, every eye in the station watching the ghost that had come back from the grave. Harper hadn't spoken all morning. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at nothing. The silence between her and Travis had turned from awkward to dangerous. He stood by the window, arms crossed, like he was trying to block the world from crashing in. "He knows everything," she said finally. Travis didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. "We should have been ready," she whispered. "I told you this day could come. You said he was dead. You believed it because it was easier," she snapped, rising to her feet. "You wanted him gone more than I did." Travis turned slowly, his eyes sharp. "Don't twist this." "I'm not," Harper said, stepping closer. "But don't act like you didn't want this life. Like you didn't step into his shoes the second you had the chance." Travis looked away, jaw tight. Logan's words haunted them both. "You buried me. You built your life on my bones." Harper sank back down, rubbing her temples. "What now?" "We keep going," Travis said. "He wants us scared. We can't give him that." But they already had. Logan hadn't just shaken their world. He cracked its foundation. Every secret they'd buried, every lie they'd told, it was all starting to unravel. Outside, hidden in his parked car, Logan watched the house. He saw their gestures, their tension. The guilt was crawling all over them, and Logan could feel it. That was the thing about people. They never knew how loud their silence was until someone listened close enough. He leaned back in the seat and whispered to himself, "They're breaking, and I haven't even started yet." Logan stood in the motel bathroom, staring at his reflection. His face was thinner now, jaw sharper, eyes colder. The man looking back at him didn't resemble the SEAL who once kissed his wife goodbye before deployment. That man was gone. What stood now was the product of lies. Lies Harper told with her lips pressed to another man's skin. Lies Travis buried behind his badge. Lies written into every condolence card, every tear shed, every empty speech at Logan's memorial. But the worst lie? The one Logan had told himself. That he could just come home and deal with it. He splashed cold water on his face and muttered, "You didn't come back to make peace. You came back to end it." Later that day, he slipped into a real estate office downtown. He needed one thing: records. Harper had sold their old house a month after the funeral. That didn't just happen without planning. Inside, he found it. A signature. A fake name used to cash out a life insurance policy, $600,000. Paid out weeks after his supposed death. Filed under Harper's name, but authorized by Travis. He exhaled hard through his nose. They planned it. That wasn't just betrayal. That was conspiracy. His hands clenched as he grabbed the file and walked out. Back in the car, Logan opened a notebook. It wasn't for thoughts or feelings. It was a blueprint. A list of names, dates, actions. He added 2 new words under Harper's name: insurance fraud. Travis had lied to the world. Harper had lied to herself. But Logan? He'd never lie again. Now it was all about truth. And truth hurts. It rained that night. Not a peaceful kind of rain. The kind that hit hard and cold, washing the streets clean like the city was trying to erase its own sins. Logan sat across from an old friend, Jonah Delgado, a retired intelligence analyst who owed Logan a favor. A big one. "You sure you want to do this?" Jonah asked, tapping the folder between them. "Once you open this box, there's no going back." Logan didn't hesitate. "There's nothing to go back to." Jonah slid the file over. "Then here's your truth." Inside were surveillance logs, emails, photos, proof of an affair that started long before Logan went missing. Months before his last mission, Harper and Travis were already building a life behind his back. The documents detailed hotel visits, burner phone records, even coded messages exchanged through Travis's department-issued phone. "I thought it was just weakness," Logan murmured, flipping through the pages. "But they planned it. They were building this while I was bleeding for this country." Jonah said nothing. He didn't have to. Logan paused at one photo. Harper laughing in a diner booth. Travis across from her, holding her hand under the table. Smiles like they were teenagers. Like they hadn't just buried a man who had killed for them. Betrayal didn't cut it anymore. This was calculated. Cold. Logan closed the folder. "This isn't about cheating. This is war." As he stood to leave, Jonah grabbed his arm. "Whatever you're planning, don't lose yourself in it." Logan met his eyes. "I already did. Now I'm just leaning into it." The door slammed behind him. That night, Harper found a photo in her mailbox, her and Travis at the diner. Nothing written. Just a date circled in red. Her hands trembled as she whispered, "He knows." Travis couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Logan, standing in the police station like he'd never left, like he'd been resurrected just to drag Travis back into hell. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to breathe. Every creak in the hallway sounded like a step. He reached for the gun on his nightstand 3 times before sunrise, even though no one came through the door. Logan hadn't threatened him directly since the confrontation, but somehow that was worse. Silence was Logan's new language, and every quiet moment screamed. At 6:42 a.m., his phone buzzed. Unknown number. Just one message. "Does she know about the warehouse?" Travis felt the blood leave his face. The warehouse was supposed to be off the grid, a place they used to meet when everything was still in secret. No cameras, no witnesses, no record. Not even Harper knew it still existed. If Logan knew about that, he knew everything. Travis jumped up, pulled on his clothes, and left without waking Harper. He drove fast, heart pounding. When he arrived, the padlock was sliced. Door wide open. Inside, the walls were clean, untouched, except for one thing. In the center of the floor, taped to a chair, was a photo of Travis in uniform, with Logan, smiling. Brothers. Next to it, a note written in thick, black ink. "You chose her. Now you live with her sins." Travis backed out slowly, chest heaving. Back at the house, Harper was gone. No note. Just silence. The shadows weren't in the corners anymore. They were in his head. And Logan? Logan was everywhere. Harper drove until the city lights disappeared behind her. Country roads wrapped in fog and silence stretched ahead, but her mind was loud, too loud. Logan was alive. Not just alive, but watching them, haunting them with reminders of what they'd done. She pulled over by an old gas station, one she and Logan used to stop at years ago on road trips. Everything about this place reeked of the past. She stepped out of the car, clutching her jacket tighter against the wind, and stared at the gravel under her boots. Gravel like the kind in the desert, where he was left to die. She didn't cry. Not because she wasn't scared, but because guilt had dried her out. Her phone buzzed. Blocked number. One message. You ever wonder why Travis pushed for that mission? She blinked. Pushed for it? She scrolled through old emails, texts she'd never deleted. Her fingers trembled. There it was. A request, sent from Travis to Logan's CO, recommending him for that final deployment. The one that almost killed him. The one that was supposed to. No, she whispered. He didn't. But the proof was in front of her. It hadn't just been a betrayal of love. Travis had sent Logan to die. A soft sound echoed behind her. She turned fast. Nothing. But the fear settled in now like cold rain. And from the shadows, unseen, Logan watched her. Not ready to confront. Not yet. He wanted her to feel it first. The real truth. That Travis hadn't just taken what was Logan's. He tried to end him. Travis sat in his car outside the church. Not for prayer. He hadn't prayed in years. But the parking lot was empty, and he needed somewhere to think. His mind was on fire. Every hour brought another message, another memory, another sign that Logan was pulling the strings now. He couldn't breathe in his own house. Couldn't trust the silence. Harper was still missing. Her phone was off. Her car hadn't moved. And Logan hadn't shown his face again. But the game hadn't stopped. If anything, it had just gotten more precise. Travis opened the glove box and pulled out the gun he'd been keeping. His hand shook as he loaded a round. He had a decision to make. Either confront Logan or disappear. Come on, man, he muttered to himself. You survived war zones. You survived worse than this. He's just a man. But that was the lie. Logan wasn't just a man anymore. He was a ghost with purpose. A soldier trained to kill. A mind sharp with trauma and clarity. Travis looked down at the gun again. What was he thinking? That he'd win? He closed the glove box. If Logan wanted war, fine. But Travis wasn't going to sit in the dark anymore. He grabbed his phone and made a call. Yeah, it's me, he said. We've got a problem. And if I go down, I'm not going down alone. The warehouse smelled like rot and dust, like forgotten things. Logan stood in the dark, waiting. Footsteps. Travis entered, gun drawn, body tense. I figured you'd come, Logan said, stepping into the light. You wanted me here, Travis replied. So here I am. What now? What now? Logan asked, voice steady. Now you listen. He tossed a file onto the table between them. Inside, photos, messages, the life insurance papers, and Harper's confession, scribbled in a panicked notebook she'd left behind when she fled. Travis skimmed the first page and froze. You set me up, he said. Logan stepped closer. No. You set yourself up. I just gave you a mirror. Travis raised his gun. I'm not going down for this. Logan didn't flinch. You already did. The second you betrayed me. The second you signed that deployment order. Silence. Then, Logan stepped forward, right into the barrel of the gun. Pulled the trigger. Travis's hand trembled. Don't push me. Why not? You pushed me into a coffin. Logan's voice dropped to a whisper. But I crawled out. A beat passed. No one moved. Then Travis's hand fell. He couldn't do it. That's when Logan struck, swift, clean. Not to kill, but to remind him the war wasn't over. Not yet. Harper stood at the edge of the lake where Logan once proposed. The same spot where she said yes. The same water he'd carried her across on a dare, laughing like nothing could ever touch them. That day felt like it belonged to someone else now. She held her phone tight in one hand, the wind catching strands of her hair as she stared at the screen. Still no signal. Still no peace. Her mind was at war. Every memory of Logan was tangled with guilt. Every smile now felt like a lie. She didn't know what was more unbearable, the weight of her betrayal or the fear of what Logan was becoming. She'd heard from Travis. The confrontation had happened. Logan hadn't killed him, but something worse had happened. Travis was shaken, quiet. A man who used to talk too much now had nothing to say. Harper wiped her face and whispered, "What do I do now?" She had two choices: run or face it. But even she didn't know if she was strong enough to face the man she once loved and the consequences of what they'd done to him. Behind her, she heard a crunch. She turned. Nobody. Her nerves were shot. Paranoia or truth. At this point, even she couldn't tell. But something told her. Logan wasn't far. The storm came in fast, gray clouds and wind like knives. But Logan didn't care. He stood outside Travis's house, soaked, silent, and still. He wasn't breaking in. He wasn't hiding. He was making a statement. Travis watched from inside. Frozen. Harper sat on the couch, breath shallow. "He's just standing there," she said. Travis paced. "He wants us to panic." "No," Harper whispered. "He wants us to remember." Logan didn't move for 37 minutes. No umbrella. No jacket. Just a stare that cut through the walls like heat. And then he was gone, but not without leaving something behind. Taped to the door was a simple white envelope. Inside, two things: a photo of Harper and Travis at the funeral, hands intertwined. A note: "You grieved for me with the same hands that killed me." That night, their house alarm tripped 3 times. No break-in, just shadows. Every time they turned a corner, they felt watched. Every sound was a warning. Logan wasn't playing anymore. This was the revenge phase. And it was just getting started. Travis couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. He looked in the mirror and barely recognized himself anymore. The once proud cop now jumped at his own reflection. And Harper? She barely spoke. Logan's silence was louder than screams. Everywhere they went, reminders followed. A voicemail with breathing. A drive-by that felt too slow. An anonymous email with a photo from their wedding. Logan was in the background. How long had he been watching? How deep did this go? Travis lost it that night. Smashed his phone. Punched a hole in the drywall. Screamed Harper's name like she could fix any of this. But she couldn't. She was unraveling too. That's when the news broke. Police Department Internal Affairs opened an investigation into Travis. Evidence submitted anonymously. Old cases. Fabricated reports. One arrest that was tied to a man who vanished. Travis's badge was on the line. "This is war," he said, pacing. Harper looked up. "It's more than that. This is his war. And we're losing." They didn't realize yet. The fall wasn't coming. It had already started. And Logan? He was still climbing. Travis sat in the dark, holding his badge in one hand, a bottle in the other. The news had spread fast. Internal investigation, suspension pending review. Everything he'd built, everything he thought he controlled, was crumbling piece by piece. But that wasn't the part that scared him. What scared him was how calm Logan had been when he showed up at the station weeks ago. No shouting, no threats, just a look, a silence that said, "I already know how this ends." Travis used to believe he was the strong one between the three of them. The one who made the hard choices, who stepped in when Logan was gone. But that was a lie, one of many. And now, he was the one unraveling. Harper wasn't doing much better. She stayed in the bedroom most days, curtains drawn, lights off. She hadn't looked Travis in the eye in 3 days. The guilt had sunk so deep into her bones, she could barely move without feeling it. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered that night, voice cracked. "Then leave," Travis shot back, bitter. "You already left him once. What's one more time?" Harper turned away, tears pooling in her eyes. She didn't answer. Couldn't. Upstairs, in the hallway outside the bedroom, was a single black envelope. Neither of them put it there. Inside? A note. "This is what broken looks like. I know. I live there." No name. No signature. But they didn't need one. Logan sat alone in a motel room 2 towns over, rain tapping against the window like a ticking clock. The room was stale, half-lit, and smelled like old cigarettes and regret. But he didn't care. He was used to discomfort, used to waiting. He stared at the map on the wall, marked with red X's and notes. Every move they'd made, every lie they told, every place they thought was safe. Now it was just a web of guilt, and he was the spider in the center. But something was shifting. He felt it in his chest. The line between justice and obsession had started to blur. He came home to burn everything down. But what came after that? What was left once the fire was out? His phone buzzed. Unknown number. One message. You win. I'll talk. Alone. No cops. Tonight. It was Harper. Logan stared at the screen. Was it a trap? Or was she finally breaking? Either way, he didn't hesitate. Bring the storm, he thought. Let's see who walks out of it. The meeting spot was quiet. A forgotten roadside chapel, the kind with peeling paint and a steeple that leaned too far left. Logan arrived first, parking 2 blocks away and walking in through the back. Seal instinct. Always have an exit. Inside, Harper waited. She looked tired. Different. Not the same woman from his memory. Not the girl who used to trace the scar on his shoulder while whispering promises into his neck. Just a shell. I didn't come here to apologize, she said, voice low. Logan didn't move. Good. I didn't come to forgive. She stepped forward. I need you to know the truth. The real truth. He said nothing. I never meant for this to happen, she started. Travis. He started pushing me right after your second deployment. You were distant. Different. I was scared. And then, when you didn't come back, when they said you were dead, I broke. Logan's jaw tightened. You didn't break. You chose him. Harper nodded. Yes, I did. But you need to understand, Travis knew about the mission. He knew it was high risk. And he pushed for it because he wanted you gone. Logan froze. That part? He suspected. But hearing her confirm it shattered something else. I never signed anything, she continued. The insurance. The paperwork. That was all him. He forged it. Used my name. Logan's silence stretched long. Then, why tell me this now? Because he's planning something, Harper said. He's panicking. And you need to be ready. Logan looked at her, eyes colder than the night outside. I've been ready since the day I clawed out of that grave. The chapel lights flickered as Harper's words echoed in Logan's mind. Travis forged it. He wanted you gone. It wasn't a guess anymore. It wasn't speculation. It was fact. Confirmed. Clear. Logan stepped out into the cold night, every breath fogging up the air like steam from a boiling engine. His heart didn't race. It thudded slow and heavy, like a countdown. He was past anger, past grief. He was in the dangerous place soldiers fear the most. Absolute clarity. Inside his mind, he wasn't in Tennessee anymore. He was back in that prison, hands tied, ribs cracked, blood drying on a concrete floor. And every moment he'd survived had been for this. The plan had changed. This wasn't revenge anymore. This was justice. And justice didn't whisper. It kicked the damn door in. Logan made one call. Not to Harper. Not to anyone he trusted. He called a man named Cole. Ex-SEAL. Tech expert. Quiet. Dangerous. The type of guy who didn't ask questions when Logan said, I need a clean file on a dirty cop tonight. Cole responded with only 2 words. Send the name. Travis Knox. Logan hung up and walked into the storm without flinching. Tonight wouldn't be about secrets anymore. Tonight would be about truth with teeth. Harper sat alone in her car, engine running, radio off. The rain on the windshield sounded like static. She couldn't drive, couldn't think. All she saw were Logan's eyes, cold, unreadable, unforgiving. She had told the truth, but it didn't bring relief. It brought weight. She had watched the man she once loved disappear piece by piece during deployments. But this version of him, what had come back, was not a broken man. It was a weapon, and she helped load the chamber. She pulled out her phone and stared at Travis's name. She wanted to call, warn him, ask him what the hell he had done. But the truth sat too thick in her throat. Maybe this was how it had to end. She looked up at the road, at the church in her rearview mirror. She whispered, God help us. But no help came, because redemption never comes easy. And Logan wasn't looking for mercy. Travis stared at his monitor, files pulled up across multiple screens. Emails, records, surveillance logs. He'd seen enough. Logan had people. Logan had resources. And worst of all, Logan had time. The door slammed downstairs. Travis grabbed his pistol and moved slow, steady, like he had during raids back in the day. But this wasn't combat. This was personal. He crept down the hallway, breath shallow. No sound. No movement. Then his phone buzzed in his pocket. One new message. Basement. Now. Travis froze. He knew what this was. A line in the sand. He took the stairs down, each one slower than the last. And there, in the center of the basement floor, a single chair. Facing the wall. And in it, a manila folder. Logan's writing across the front. What you buried didn't stay buried. Travis opened it. Inside were photos, documents, a timeline. Everything he'd done, laid out with precision. Logan had dissected him like a surgeon. And this wasn't the end. This was the warning shot. Suddenly, every light in the basement shut off. Darkness. A voice whispered behind him. You should have stayed in my shadow. Travis turned, but Logan was already gone. The next morning, Travis's front yard was crawling with media vans. He stood behind the blinds, shirt half-buttoned, eyes wide. On the TV, his own face stared back at him. Badge number, full name, headlines blaring. Small-town hero sheriff under internal investigation for corruption, fraud, and abuse of power. It wasn't just the report. It was the evidence. Undeniable, detailed, dated, sourced, and sent from an anonymous tip. Harper stepped out of the bedroom, still in the same clothes from the night before. Her face said what neither of them could. He's here, and he just hit harder than ever. Travis grabbed the remote and muted the TV, pacing like a caged animal. This is war, he muttered. He's not stopping until I lose everything. Harper leaned against the wall, arms crossed. You're losing everything because of what you did. Not him. He turned sharply. Don't pretend you're innocent. I never said I was, she snapped. But I didn't try to erase someone from the world. Silence fell. The kind that means the last bridge just burned. Then the doorbell rang. Neither moved. Harper's voice was barely above a whisper. Is that him? But when they opened the door, there was no one. Just a box. Inside? Travis's badge. Cracked down the middle. Logan watched from his truck, parked 2 houses down. He didn't blink. Didn't move. He had studied them long enough to know their tells. Travis's shoulders slumped. Harper's jaw tightened. They were cracking. Exactly as planned. But Logan wasn't satisfied. Because revenge wasn't just about watching them fall. It was about making sure they knew why. His phone buzzed. Cole again. You ready for the drop? He asked. Do it. Travis won't survive this. You know that, right? Logan stared out the windshield. He already didn't. That man died when he sent me away. Cole paused. And you? Who are you now? Logan didn't answer. Because he didn't know. At the local news station, the footage went live at 6 p.m. sharp. Bodycam leaks. Evidence of police cover-ups. Names. Faces. Timelines. And a voice recording. Travis. Harper. Talking. Plotting. The audio was grainy, but clear enough to destroy them. Public opinion flipped in minutes. By nightfall, protesters gathered outside the station. And Logan? He sat in his truck, finally feeling something like peace. But it was short, because as he drove away, he saw a car tailing him. And it wasn't Travis. Harper had disappeared again. This time, for real. Travis sat alone in the living room, the sound of angry chants outside muffled only by the television, where his name was being dragged across every network in the state. The police board called. Suspension was no longer pending. It was active. Indefinite. His house had been egged. His tires slashed. And now, inside his home, he could barely breathe. He reached for his phone. Typed Logan's number. Yes, he still had it memorized, and stared at the screen. Should he call? Beg? Apologize? But what do you say to a man you buried? He hit delete. Instead, he typed one word. Enough. Sent it. No reply. Just silence. Logan, miles away, saw the message. His face didn't change. He turned the phone face down, looked out at the empty highway ahead, and said quietly, "Not yet." The motel room was silent, except for the soft hiss of a nearby neon sign outside. Logan sat at the edge of the bed, an old photo in his hands, him, Harper, and Travis, smiling, young, before it all went to hell. He stared at it like he was trying to read a version of himself that no longer existed. That's when the knock came. 2 slow taps. He grabbed his pistol, checked the door peephole. Harper. Alone. He opened the door cautiously. She stepped in, dripping from the rain, eyes swollen from crying. No makeup. No mask. Talk, he said flatly. I found something, she whispered, handing him a flash drive. Travis recorded a meeting with a man. A contractor. Black Ops. Weeks before your last deployment. Logan plugged it in. The audio played low. Travis's voice. He won't come back. That's the point. Logan's chest froze. Another voice. There's a cost. Travis. Money's ready. I just want the mission greenlit. Logan paused the file. So it was never about you and her, he muttered. It was about erasing me completely. Harper sat across from him, wiping tears from her jawline. I didn't know, not back then. I swear. He didn't speak. Didn't yell. He just nodded, slow, cold. Because now he had what he needed. Not just motive. Proof. Harper stayed on the bed, knees pulled to her chest. Logan stood at the window, eyes distant, hands in fists. You want me to forgive you? He asked, not turning around. No, she said. I wouldn't believe it if you did. He nodded. Good. Silence. You know what hurts more than anything? Logan finally said. I kept thinking if I made it home, if I crawled out alive, you'd be the reason. That you were waiting. Harper's throat tightened. I was. You were with him. She said nothing. That's what people don't get, he continued. Betrayal isn't loud. It's quiet. It's the moment you realize they moved on before the funeral. She looked up, her voice barely a whisper. I didn't know how to survive without you. You didn't even try, he said, turning to face her. You didn't grieve. You replaced. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Logan walked to the door. I don't forgive you, Harper. But I'm done bleeding over it. He opened the door, paused. But if you really want redemption, then help me finish this. Logan and Harper stood in front of the old municipal archive building. No cameras. No alarms. Just records that no one bothered to protect anymore. They slipped inside under cover of night. Second floor, Harper said. Backroom files. Travis logged things there, unofficially. They moved fast. Silent. Logan's SEAL instincts kicked in. He scanned every angle while Harper opened drawers and thumbed through folders. Then she found it. A black envelope marked with an insignia private security clearance. Inside, a contract with Travis's forged signature. He had greenlit a third-party op with foreign ties. The operation that sent Logan into the kill zone. No backup. No exit plan. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a hit. They made copies. As they left, Harper whispered, You're not going to kill him, are you? Logan didn't look at her. He didn't have to. His silence was the answer. Travis stepped into the department for what might be the last time. Whispers followed him like smoke. Coworkers he'd trained now avoiding eye contact. His locker had already been cleared. The only thing left was a folder taped to the inside door. Inside, a printed email thread between him and a private contractor. A time-stamped bank transfer. A single line written in ink. When it all collapses, remember, you laid the first brick. He gripped the folder until his knuckles went white. Then he tore it in half, dropped the pieces, and walked out, head down, mind spinning. Outside, reporters swarmed him. Microphones in his face. Questions like bullets. Did you fund the operation that left Logan Creed for dead? Were you having an affair before his mission? Are you cooperating with federal investigators? Travis shoved through the crowd. His car was waiting, but it wasn't parked where he left it. It was moved. Just slightly. That tiny shift told him one thing. Logan had been there. Close enough to touch the handle. close enough to leave a message. He got in, drove fast. No direction, just away. But the truth had already caught up, and it wasn't slowing down. Back at the motel, Logan stared at the evidence spread across the table. Documents, photos, files that could end Travis's career, his freedom, maybe even his life. But that wasn't enough. This wasn't about exposure anymore. This was about balance, about consequence. Harper stood by the door, arms folded. If you go through with this, there's no coming back. Logan didn't look at her. There was no coming back the day I saw my name on a tombstone. You could disappear after this, she said softly. You have the file. Send it. Let the system handle him. Logan finally looked up. The system made him. It protected him. He tapped the file. This isn't justice. It's paperwork. So what is? Logan's voice was quiet, but cold. Something permanent. She stepped closer. If you do this, the man I knew dies for good. He didn't respond. Because deep down, that man already had. The file went live at 9:17 a.m., sent to federal prosecutors, the press, internal affairs, and one more recipient, Travis Knox. Alongside it, a message. You don't get to walk away. You crawl like I did. Travis read the message, then walked into his bathroom and threw up. By 10 a.m., his phone was buzzing nonstop. Termination. Legal threats. One federal subpoena. The fallout had begun. There would be no recovery. But Logan wasn't watching the headlines. He was driving. Highway. Northbound. No destination. His hands on the wheel. His mind hollow. He had everything he wanted. And yet, there was nothing left inside. At a gas station, he sat on the hood of the truck, staring at the sky. A kid passed by and asked, "Are you okay, mister?" Logan didn't answer right away. Then he nodded once. "Yeah, kid. Just tired." But inside, he wasn't sure if he was free or just finished. Logan sat alone at a rest stop just off the state highway. The sun was rising behind him, casting a pale orange across the empty lot. His truck engine was off. The radio was dead quiet. All he could hear was the wind scraping against the metal signs. He had dropped off the final envelope the night before, an anonymous package delivered to Travis's father's doorstep. Inside was a letter, not a threat, not revenge. The truth. Every step Travis had taken to dismantle Logan's life, and every scar Logan had carried because of it. He didn't do it for vengeance. Not this time. He did it because someone, somewhere, needed to know the real story. That their son, their golden boy sheriff, had tried to bury a man who refused to stay dead. Logan lit a cigarette, something he hadn't done in years. He hated the taste, but it was the first thing he'd done in months that felt honest. Across the parking lot, a trucker got out, stretched, and nodded at him. Logan nodded back. No words. No recognition. Just two strangers trying to outrun something. For the first time in a long time, Logan didn't feel like he had to chase anything. Not revenge. Not justice. Not even peace. Just the road. The motel phone rang twice before Harper picked up. She hadn't heard from Logan in 3 days. The voice on the line wasn't his. "This Harper?" a man asked. "Yes, name's Cole. He left something for you." Click. 10 minutes later, a file arrived in her email. Encrypted. Titled, Legacy. Inside, a single video. Logan sat in front of a camera, expression hard but honest. "If you're watching this, it means I've made my choice." He paused. "I didn't want to become the monster, but I needed them to feel it, to know what they did." Another pause. "You helped me get here, not by saving me, but by telling the truth." He leaned forward. "I don't know what comes next. Maybe I disappear. Maybe I don't. But I wanted you to know, I'm not angry anymore. A beat, but I'm not coming back." The video ended. Harper closed the laptop slowly. Tears welled in her eyes, not from pain, but from the truth she couldn't ignore. Logan had forgiven her in his own way, but he had also set her free. And himself. Travis stood on the edge of a cliff just outside of town. One of those quiet places where people went when they didn't know what else to do. The wind was strong. Cold. The kind that made you think. Everything was gone. Job, respect, reputation. His name was in every headline for all the wrong reasons. He held the last thing Logan had mailed him. A photo. Their SEAL graduation. On the back, a message in Logan's handwriting. You were my brother. You could have said no. That broke something in Travis. Not because of guilt, but because of truth. He had made his choices. And now, there was no one left to blame. Behind him, tires crunched gravel. Logan, alive, in person. Neither said anything at first. Then Logan stepped forward, slow and calm. You came here to jump, he asked. Travis didn't answer. Logan shrugged. Don't. That's the easy way out. And you don't deserve easy. Travis turned, jaw clenched. So what? You kill me here. No, Logan said. I already buried you. Now you get to live with it. He walked past him, didn't even look back. Travis just stood there, alone, silent, and completely unmade. Because Logan didn't need to pull the trigger. He had already won. Logan didn't sleep anymore. Not really. He rested, sometimes. Closed his eyes. But real sleep, the kind that gave peace, had left him somewhere between the explosion and the betrayal. Now, his rest came from motion. A truck. A map. No fixed address. He stayed off the grid. No banks. No social media. A new name on the license he barely used. He wasn't hiding. He just wasn't interested in being found. The only thing he left behind was the folder titled Legacy, a full account of the mission, the forged authorization, Travis's corruption, and the emotional fallout that followed. Inside it were journal entries, memories, even a letter to a future he no longer planned to meet. If anyone ever read it, they'd understand one thing. Logan Creed didn't disappear. He chose to walk away. Not from justice. From the version of himself the world tried to make. Somewhere along the border of Arizona, he helped an old mechanic fix a flat. No questions asked. Just a nod. The man offered him a beer after. Logan refused but smiled. That was his life now. No revenge. No mission. Just miles. Somewhere out there, people still whispered about the man who came back from the dead to destroy the ones who buried him. But Logan? He wasn't chasing ghosts anymore. He was one. The sun was low over the hills, casting everything in gold and shadow. Logan parked near an overlook, engine still humming. It was quiet. No sirens, no cameras, no voices trying to pull him in 1,000 directions. Just air, space, and silence. He stepped out, walked to the edge of the cliff, same kind Travis had once stood on, and stared out over the valley. The wind hit hard, but he didn't flinch. From his back pocket, he pulled out a folded photo, the one with Harper and Travis. He stared at it a long time, then let it go. The wind took it. No dramatics. No final speech. Just release. He stood there for a while, not thinking about revenge, or war, or what he lost, but what he didn't lose. Himself. He didn't turn into the monster they tried to make him. He didn't kill out of impulse. He didn't self-destruct. He chose his path, sharp and brutal, but with purpose. Behind him, headlights approached slow, cautious. He didn't turn to look. He just muttered, "Took you long enough." A familiar voice answered behind him. I didn't know where else to go. It was Harper. She stood there. No makeup. No words rehearsed. I didn't come to fix anything, she said. I came to say thank you for not becoming what we made you. Logan nodded once, then turned back to the view. No goodbye. No forgiveness. Just two people standing at the edge of everything they used to be, and letting it go. Logan drove west until the road stopped lying to him. The towns grew fewer, the voices quieter, and somewhere between the canyons and the coast, the anger finally ran out. Not because he forgave them, but because he didn't need to carry it anymore. He parked near the ocean. No destination, no plan, just instinct. The waves were wild that day, slamming into the rocks like they were trying to break something that wouldn't move. He sat on the hood of the truck, boots propped on the bumper, wind tearing through his jacket. There was no ceremony, no speech, no one to witness the end of a story they'd never understand. Just Logan, alive, whole, scarred, but not ruined. He reached into the glove box and pulled out a small box, burnt at the corners, bent, but still sealed. Inside it, his Navy SEAL insignia, the only thing they hadn't stripped from him. He looked at it one last time, then closed the box and buried it in the sand. Not to forget. To mark the end. Because sometimes closure isn't a clean line. It's a choice. To stop bleeding. To stop chasing. To stop being what they turned you into, and start being who you decide to be. As the sun dipped low behind the waves, Logan turned toward the highway. The future was waiting, uncertain, empty, wide open. But this time, he would write the story. And no one would ever erase him again. That's the end of Logan Creed's story. But maybe it's just the beginning of yours. If this story hit you in any way, like it, share it, and subscribe to the channel. Let's keep stories like this alive, because somewhere out there, someone needs to hear them. Now it's your turn. Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever forgiven someone who never apologized? What did your closure look like? I'll be in the comments, reading every word. Until next time, keep your story yours.